I'm Mike Lillywhite. I currently own and run Lillywhite Brothers Garage, Queen Street, Emsworth, with my brother Paul. The garage was originally owned by Bob Wheatley and run between him and Bob and Danny Wheatley. We think they probably started in sort of early 40s and built the that was the first garage. That was taken over in 1949 by my dad and his brothers. There were 4 brothers to start with. There was Bob Lillywhite, Joe Lillywhite, Len Lillywhite and Charlie, our dad. Bob started here only so that they had enough money to buy the garage, but then he always intended to run he was a heating engineer and started his own business in North Street, which was very successful heating and plumbing business. That left the 3 brothers. They then continued until Uncle Joe retired first, being the oldest, and then in 1985 my dad and I and my brother bought out Uncle Len, with Dad then retiring in 1987, leaving myself and Paul to run the garage to today, which is 2014. I started at the garage as a young lad. I'd often be down here after school. Mum worked in the office and we would come here after school during holidays, so really I was brought up at the garage and took an interest in cars from that time, really. But when I was 14 until I left school at 16, I regularly worked at the garage evenings and during the holidays, doing all sorts of repairs. So I was quite a competent mechanic by the time I left school, although I still had to do my apprenticeship. Paul was more interested in bookkeeping, worked for Unigate Dairies, and he joined us in 1985 when we bought Uncle Len out, and he then carried on with the paperwork at the business alongside Mum in the first few years, and then taking that side over. So the combination has worked quite well, with me being involved with the mechanical side and Paul taking care of the paperwork in the office.
You weren't ever tempted to do something else then, Mike?
No, I wasn't. I was originally, I always wanted to work in the garage. I was always interested in cars and early days in motorbikes as well, anything mechanical really. From a young age I had a part-time business repairing lawnmowers in our back shed and rotavators. So anything mechanical I like working on, and now driving all sorts of different vehicles and contraptions. Anything that drives, I'm interested in it. Anything mechanical. I was originally looking to do an apprenticeship elsewhere. Some thought it'd be better for me to do an apprenticeship elsewhere and then come into the garage. Fortunately for me, that year there wasn't a high intake or availability of apprenticeships, so the only place that I could get a job was here. So lucky for me, I started here, which was good because we work on a whole range of cars. I could have otherwise ended up at a main dealer working on just one make, whereas here we work on all makes and all models and all ages, so it was a lot better experience as an apprentice to work on a big variety.
How would you say it's changed from when you started out, Mike, on the repair side?
Well, the garage now, we've developed it over the years. We extended the workshop to the rear of the garage some time ago, and more recently we've developed to the eastern end, putting another MOT lane and another 2 repair bays there. Also over the time we put a spray booth in, purpose-built spray booth for spraying cars, which was a requirement on the body shop due to the changes in paint. You needed an oven and you couldn't spray it out in the open anymore due to the chemicals in the paint. Working on the cars has changed hugely. The older cars, I always say they're nuts and bolts, and whereas the new ones, the electronics and technology that goes into them is a lot more advanced. Equipment-wise, we have a lot more specific equipment for repairing cars, cam belt kits, electronics. Obviously, the diagnostic side now is just phenomenal. There's far more technology on a car than I think the rocket that first went to the moon had on it. You can have sort of 60 electronic control units, ECUs, on a car now. The very early ones, when we started going electronic, had one to control the engine management side. So there's a vast change there. The motors now are a lot harder to work on. The cam belts can be quite a complex system, the clutch can be a complex system, and obviously all of the other bits that we're coming along with now, the anti-locking brakes, the electronic stability control, it just goes on, airbags, goes on and on, the technology now.
And you're interested in old cars, I think, as well, restoring those. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I due to us growing as a garage, I ended up spending more time organising than working on cars. So I lost touch really with working on cars, and through that also lost interest in some ways. Modern cars have no meaning to me really. They're very smooth, they're very easy to drive, they're great pieces of engineering, there's no doubt about that. But they're not, for me, having grown up with older cars, they're not the fun to work on. So mainly through getting involved with a race car at Goodwood Revival, it renewed my interest in cars, and I've now got more involved with older cars. We do part restoration, but mainly little pieces and engine rebuilds and smaller jobs really. The main work is still modern vehicles, which is our fast moving stuff. But I very much enjoy the older cars. I enjoy driving older cars, rebuilding a MG/TD. Bear in mind this is 2014. It'll be interesting when that's finished. What year that'll be? It's going to be an ongoing project. I'm very involved with Old Yeller, which is the race car that comes over from America to race at Goodwood, and we show that around England. And now and then I'll get a chance to drive it as well. So I've very much got into older cars. A lot of this equipment is surviving from the garage, and original equipment from the garage. Fortunately, we had an old stores where a lot of stuff got put in it. It survived over the years. This one's not actually from the garage. I bought this a little while ago. This is a Champion plug cleaner. It sandblasts the plugs. Obviously on older cars this was more important because they burnt oil, which caused a lot of carbon on the plugs. So an important piece of equipment. And we use this regularly all the time. We still use this one now. If we get older cars, it's always nice to clean the plugs up using this. This is a Steno vulcanizer this was bolted to the bench in the back of the workshop, and this was used for repairing tyres and inner tubes. The tyre was put in there with a patch, clamped down and then plugged in here, and the heat would then vulcanise the patch to the tyre or the inner tube. It had a timing clip that used to put in there, and it would fuse, it would blow when it had been in there long enough. That gave problems, so it was bypassed, so you had to remember to turn this off. Otherwise there'd be a sudden smell of burning rubber. When you took the tyre out, it had a flat on it, so we'd have to drive the car up the road to get rid of the flat in the tyre, hopefully. The other interesting thing about this piece was that it was bolted to a wooden bench, but it didn't have any earth on it, so if you weren't careful you could quite easily get an electric shock off of this, and many of us remember getting that first electric shock and you've never done it again. You always remember to unplug it. This was in the old stores and bolted on the wall for many years. I took it down ready for our exhibition earlier this year. This was holding all the different types of welding rod that they would have used. And it's still as it was with the original bits of rod in there. Now, of course, most of it's MIG weld. We very rarely braze now. certainly don't do any cast iron or alley welding, but you can see the range of different rods that they would have used. I'm not sure how successful some of that was, especially the cast. Can you see? This is the original till. Used to be on the front desk, and it just wound up. It didn't actually print anything. There was a till roll in it, but the cell was actually written in by hand, which also encouraged us youngsters to write other messages to my auntie on there. And I know my cousin Jackie was quite fond of putting messages on there, so when she cashed up, she'd get this sudden message. I don't know if you can see the original safe underneath. This was the original safe from here, and it ended up in a separate workshop that was round the corner called the Green Shed, and that was round there. R&K Autos ended up running their business from there, and this was there until they shut down, and it was then given back to us. This is a original brake meter. This is original from here, and it was only used once, and I'll tell you why in a minute. This was the early means of checking brakes. The car would be driven up the road, and this pendulum would swing forward and scribe a line on a card that would give you the braking efficiency of a car. We use a very similar meter, Tapley meter, which we still use now. It works on the same principle of the G-force pushes it up. The interesting thing with this was it still lives in its original box. It was only used once because my uncle took it out on a road test, got it all ready, put his foot hard on a brake to test it, and went straight left through the hedge. So he put it back in the box and said it claimed it was dangerous and would never use it again. This is the original typewriter. It's a bit rusty because it's been up in the attic for quite a long time. Obviously, in those days, we didn't have the computers. The lads had job cards, which I remember well. As kids, they wrote in pencil so that we could rub them out and reuse the job cards. And then the invoices were typed up on this computer, sent out to the customer. Not as quickly as they should have been, I believe. This box I found upstairs, and for quite a long time I wasn't sure what it was, but I remember my uncle saying that it was something to do with a steam engine. So I've made a few inquiries, and it's for cleaning out the flukes on a steam engine, with the different. These are for a tapered seat, and these are for straight down the bores. So I'm still not seen it in use, but I believe that's what it's for, an old steam engine, and I know it was lent to someone who had a steam engine boat in the harbour to clean out the parts on. Display cabinet we set up for the 65th anniversary, and it shows some of our original documents, which fortunately were saved in a case in the attic that I recently found. In here there's the original bank statements from 1949, which were handwritten. There's the original agreement from when my dad and his brothers took over the premises. The top row is to do with the Factory Act, which was the original health and safety. We all think that health and safety is quite a new thing. It's not at all. The factory inspector would come round and check your premises. It's true it's not quite the same as what it is now. Many will argue whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it was certainly there. Also in here we have some old cheques, receipts which always had a stamp on them. And this shelf here is old apprenticeship papers from some of the early apprentices that were here, which Roy Miller, people like that, Bernie Gudge, and this is their records as well as some of their college reports.
How long were the apprenticeship apprenticeships?
The apprenticeship in those days, I think was 4 years. Yeah, it was 4 or 5 years. It was, when I done mine, it was 4 years, and then I did an extra year at a higher level, verging into management and more technical side. Down the bottom, we have some of our old catalogues that came with the cars that they would have sold at the time. The interesting one is there's some commercial vehicles, Thames Traders, 4-ton commercial vehicle. There's old Fords, obviously the Morris, because they were Morris agents. There's also an original, or one of the first testing manuals from when the MOT test first started. I believe it was 1965. And other interesting handbooks from cars. This is our original Krypton tuner. In the early days, this was the electronic diagnostic. It would basically show a graph on here, which would show the spark plug, the power in the high tension side and in the low tension side. It also had a vacuum gauge and a very good timing light. This is what we call the big box tuners. So they went from here and then started getting bigger, although they do nowhere near as much as what a very small meter would these days electronically. But quite a useful piece of kit in its day, and used regularly on a daily basis.
So Bernie, when did you decide to go into the motor trade?
Well, it was sheer luck, really. My dad was standing on the bus stop near the Covent Church, and Joe Lillywhite came by. He'd been able to pick up some spare parts or something, and gave Dad a lift home. It was only about 3 weeks ago when I left school, and he said, "What's your lad doing then when he finishes school?" He said, "Well, no idea." So we said, "Well, I'll tell you what." He said, "Why not get him to come down and see me?" He said, "We could do with another apprentice." So that was that. That was my start at Lillywhite. So I went down and had a look and thought, this looks really interesting. I was engineering minded, a bit like my father. So it all fell into place, really. At the school, lots of the utility companies had come round. They wanted lads digging holes, you know, that sort of thing, to make it cheap labour, I suppose, but I didn't want to do any of that. So that's how I got into it. I got into an apprenticeship straight away from the age of 15, and it was brilliant. I had about a week and a half away or so from school and straight into work. Very good. And it was really great fun. Yeah. More questions? No?
Well, what was the training like?
Well, the training was very good. I'd only been away from school and thought, oh, I'll escape that, that's good. Away from school about 2 months, and then had to start at Portsmouth College, engineering college, 1 day a week. And I was there for a year, and then carried on until I was 21 at Bognor Regis. From that, I got City and Guilds passes and my National Craftsman certificate and this sort of thing, which was very good. So the training really was very good. And one or two of the other lads who didn't do apprenticeships, they went straight into repairing punchers and things like that, whereas I went straight onto the workshop floor doing, well, teaching them from the start off how to service cars, how it all worked, and they told you how things worked whilst you were doing the job. So it wasn't just, this is how you repair it, this is how it all works and repair it, which was very good training. Today it's all massive spare parts, nobody strips and rebuilds much these days, so it's a good grounding, it really was, it was superb. I remember I was watching Len Lillywhite do some arc welding, and he was telling me how it worked, and the phone rang. He said, "Right, your turn." He gave me all the equipment and left me to it. And I'd never done it before. I was only 15, goodness me. But that was the way things were. I mean, that's how you learn things. They put you in at the deep end and then sort of pointed you in the right direction. And it was really, really good. And I think all the lads that worked there had that sort of training. It was excellent, really was.
And what sort of hours did you work? And
Oh,
how
that
much
was
did you get paid?
it was a 40-hour week, so you worked Saturday mornings, a 44-hour week, sorry, so you worked Saturday mornings up until 12 o'clock. And after 2 or 3 years, they asked us if we would do every third or fourth week Saturday afternoons to help on the petrol and any odd breakdown repairs and things like that as well. So very often you'd work right up until 6 or 7 o'clock on a Saturday, as well as your full ordinary week. But that was all overtime. But it was many years, even once they got into the official 40-hour week, I suppose they changed it down. We still did the 44 hours regardless. It was a service industry, so you were expected to work till half the weekend anyway. So, but there you go. It's pretty good. We sort of help your customers out and keep them going. That's the go, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So did you find you had quite a lot of fun in the work?
Oh, there's not the mad rush then there is today. I must have my car within 5 minutes, because in those days there was plenty of public transport every 15 minutes along the main road, and there was no problem sort of thing. If somebody brought a car in, if I can have it back in a few days, that'd be good. It was only if somebody who worked away and really needed their vehicle. So working hours and the jobs we did, it was a lot easier. It really was. And of course, in those days, most of the cars, the bonnets opened from the side. They didn't open from the front like they do. They all opened up from the side. And then the MOT came in around 1960, and all those cars suddenly disappeared. They were all taken off the road, and all more new cars were purchased, and they were used then. So that was all change after about 5 years. But even so, we still had quite a few older cars where some of the older customers like to keep their old ones. Yeah, here we are.
And what was your routine during the day? So you told us you had some nice tea breaks.
Oh yeah, well, we had our first morning tea break at around 10 o'clock, 10 past 10, and another one in the afternoon at about 3, quarter past 3. The very first day I started, that was August the 8th, 1955, goodness me. And I met with Jeff Page. He took me round, and we had an old Emsworth laundry van. We had to put a propeller shaft joint in. Very first job. Nice white shirt, clean trousers, straight underneath this thing, no overalls or anything. Muck and cobwebs everywhere. So we got the prop shaft out, and he was showing me how it all worked and what we were going to do. And then he said, no bad language in the next 10 minutes. I said, what's that? And we had the old big wooden box radio on. And he said, it's 5 to 10. He said, we have the religious 5 minutes and a hymn and a prayer on the radio. He said, so I couldn't believe it. And then he thrust a teapot, an old white enamel jug in my hand, and he said, right, round the other shop, he said, Uncle Bob would fill it up with tea for us. So I went round, he said, there's the money for the cakes, nip into Davis's shop, which was next door to the garage. So we buy a big bag of cakes for 6p. 6p, goodness me. And then we came back then and we'd have our tea break, sit on the benches and have a natter about what was going on and football or whatever things that was on the radio the day before. There wasn't much telly in those days for us sort of thing. I don't think we had a telly even then, not in 55. So in the afternoons it'd be the same sort of thing. But now and again, Mr. Lillywhite, Len Lillywhite, that would be, he'd come round and said, come on lads, you've been too long on this tea break, you're either dead or working. That was his favourite saying. And he'd gee us up quick and get us catching up and working again. He didn't like us going too long, but if he'd gone out on a breakdown somewhere, we always made it last a little bit longer, which is always good. Oh dear.
So what happened, that sounds really fun, so what happened when petrol rationing came in at one point?
When they had the Suez crisis, of course it went on for a little while with petrol rationing, so it was very difficult, people using their vehicles for any length of time. So the amount of workload went right down, and we had 2 chaps were sort of hovering around retirement that came in and used to give us a hand doing things, and of course we never had work for them for a while. So for about a year or so it was fairly quiet, but then it all came back again as soon as it stopped. But it was a bit difficult for a while, but they always kept us busy. There was always the workshop to paint various things to make, where we could improve the layout of the shop. So there was always things that kept us busy, which was just, you know, that was the main thing, was just to keep us all going. But some of the big places were really struggling, you know, they didn't have much work at all.
Yeah. Wasn't there a car that got too much petrol in it or something?
Oh, I was out on the forecourt sorting some petrol one day, and a chap come in with a van, and we were talking about something, and he said, I think it was 2, he said, and I misheard what he said, and I ended up putting about 3 times more petrol in it than I should have done, and he only had his ration tickets for a small amount, for 2 gallons. I think I put him about 8 gallons in. Oh dear. So he had to sort of sign a piece of paper to get, so that he would bring his next load of tickets in, so that, because we had to show every gallon of petrol that was sold had to be counted for on the tickets. So, and the old ministry were a bit hot on that, so we had to make sure we brought them in. Lucky enough, he was a regular customer and had an account with us, so it wasn't too bad. But I was giving the old finger wag, being careful. I was only about, how old I would have been there, 16, about 15 and a half, so I haven't been doing it very long. At least I got away with it. Just.
And you were telling us earlier that you got involved with helping demolish the building next door.
Oh well, when they bought the baker's shop and the cottage next door to it, where the office and the drive-through into the workshops now stand, we pulled all of that down, and the big workshop round the back used to be the car park and van park, and where they had one of their ovens. So we ended up demolishing all of that in the summer evenings and weekends, and we did a lot of work on that, pulling it all apart. My dad was there helping start stack tiles, and Roger Orwood, he pushed some tiles through the roof so that he could stand up and then pass the tiles down a chute. Some of the tiles slipped off and went down and hit poor old Dad on the head, and nearly knocked him out. The old dormer windows, we put the rope round and we were pulling it into the floor. Unfortunately, it nearly went into the road, but we managed to just get it in time, and it fell on the floor, went straight through the floor, through the next floor, onto the old workshop, the shop counter, and a couple of the bricks went straight out through the plate glass window, which Len was hoping to save, and it all went out into the road. Oh, what a mess. And Jack Page, that was doing the scaffolding and supplying some of the scaffolding and taking away all the rubbish. No, Jack wasn't doing the scaffolding, he was just taking away the rubbish, but the company that was doing the scaffolding, they didn't fix it to the building properly. And they got it 3/4 of the way up, and it all fell out into the road, with all the traffic going by. Lucky enough it didn't hit anybody, but it frightened one lady to death with a pram. She really, oh dear, that was a bit dodgy. But it was an interesting experience, pulling it all to pieces. We spent nearly 3 months trying to knock down an old air raid shelter in the back garden of the cottage at the back. And that was rather good. I've never known anything so toughly built. There was only a small air raid shelter too, but you just could not beat it apart. But we had quite an experience. We built all our own metal frameworks for the roof, all the roof beams. We made all of those. As this was all the general engineering that we were taught, as well as car repairs. You know, we were taught all sorts of things which normal garages would never do. But that became very useful over the years, doing things for yourself. You know, if you could buy these mini welders and do things for yourself easily, that was good. Yeah, you wouldn't get that in a modern garage today, that's for sure. Good training.
And you said you had a bit of a shocking experience one day.
Yes. We put some of the new rafters and all that in, and they changed all the benches round, the big wooden benches, and they had one of these electronic vulcanisers for welding patches onto inner tubes and to patches on the inside of tyres. You were allowed to do that those days, not today. And one of the shorter lads was trying to push some of the old steel rods that we used to store in the rafters. And I said, "Cool, short little fella, let me do that." So I put my hand up, put my hand on the top of the vulcaniser, and earthed myself out to the roof, full 240. I eventually let go, shot across the floor, bounced off the wall, came back and ended up in a heap of tyres. Joe Lillywhite came up, he said, "You all right, lad?" And I said, "I think so." He said, "Oh," I said, "that makes the old heart pump, doesn't it?" He said, "It's pretty good." So I was sitting there going, "Oh God." And then Len said, oh, I'll fix that. And he put a big earth wire up to the roof, switched the power back on again and blew the fuse box off the wall. Great cloud of smoke, and we had no electrics for about 4 or 5 hours. We were waiting for the SEB to come in and put the new fuse box in. Burnt the whole lot in, so I got the full power. Oh dear.
Seem to have survived very well.
Made the hair stand on a bit, I can tell you that. Goodness me. Oh gosh.
Anyway, tell us, Bernie, about when you bought your first car.
Oh yeah, a friend of mine was working in a garage in Chichester, and Adcock's that was, and he just bought himself this little Ford Special. It was a Wolseley, old pre-war Wolseley car with a little aluminium body on it and a Ford engine in. I used to ride around in that all over the place. And he sent this chap down to see me in this great big 1934 Speed 20L, this great big headlights, wonderful car. And I was looking around and this chap said, oh, £75 I want for this. I said, I haven't got that sort of money, that's what, 7 or 8 weeks' wages, you know. And Joe Lillywhite came out and he said, oh, I could just see you in this, lad. I said, that's lovely, isn't it? I was 19, and tell him you'll have it. I said, oh, well, I haven't got that sort of money. How much have you got? I said, I've only got 15 quid. I was going to buy an old Morris 8 or something like that. No, he said, I'll buy it. He said, you can pay me back as and when you like, you know, as much as you want at any time. So he bought it for me, and it cost him, I had some fun in that. 3.5 years, nearly 4 years I had that, everywhere in it. Silverstone to the motor racing for the Grand Prix one day, 230 miles or so, 40 miles there and back, 13 gallons of petrol and a gallon of oil. Blue smoke wherever we went. I saw the same model car at Goodwood about 18 months ago at an old car meeting. And the chap was telling me he just had his valued for £125,000, and I sold mine for 50. Ouch. There you go. Hindsight. But they were very good when it came to cars and this sort of thing, because Roger Horwood and Keith, they would do stock car racing, so they were building a stock car, maintaining it, doing all this sort of thing, and they let them use all the workshops, working at night and weekends to keep them up together. They couldn't be more helpful. Super chaps to work for, the three brothers. Yeah, very, very good. Lovely.
Any more stories you have to tell us?
Oh gosh, but there was our old breakdown lorry, vicious thing. And Roger only mentioned that the other day when he phoned me from Spain. That was one of our other apprentices that was there. It was first thing in the morning, we had to get it out of the workshop. It was the last vehicle to put away when we locked the workshop up. And always had to start it by hand. Oh, and it used to kick back, have you on the hands, then it was an awful thing to start. And Len and myself come up to the car park that used to be just opposite here, which used to be Reeves' yard, more or less where the bypass goes through now. And one of the Reeves lorries had broken down, so we hooked the hand cranked crane on the front axle to lift it. And I'm winding away, and there's Len moaning at me saying, come on, put some beef into it. He says, it's not even lifting off the ground yet. But of course the lorry was so heavy, as I was winding, the front of our breakdown lorry was going up off the road. So it wouldn't lift it, it lifted us instead. So we let it down, went back down to the garage, and we had a big old concrete roller where we were doing our own car park tarmac. And we tied it, lifted it up with the hand crane we used for lifting engines out, tied it on the front of the lorry, came back, and then we lifted the lorry again, and the extra weight held the front of the wagon down. But every time we hit a bump going down to Queen Street, the front of the breakdown lorry was lifting off the ground as we were doing it. Bonnie Middleton, what a lovely chap. He worked at Foster's, and he retired, but was just up for retirement. And he came up to us to do some servicing like that, because he knew a bit about motors, he was quite good. And we had an old little coke stove, and he always used to light that up in the morning in the winter. The rest of the workshop was freezing cold. It was all right 3 feet round the stove, but anywhere further away from that, and it was too cold. And that's paraffin. He used to put the paraffin on the coke and sticks, and he closed the lid, got down on his hands and knees, lit the match on a piece of paper and stuck it in the him, and it went whoop! Big flame shot out between his legs. the lid flew open and hit him on the head. He went backwards holding a piece of stick in the air. His eyebrows all singed. And he accidentally put petrol on it instead of paraffin. Oh dear, oh dear. Great fun. And he was lovely, lovely man. We had great fun there. And I was there 15 years altogether. And some of the lads that came after me, they've been there and worked there all their working life, most of them. Some of the lads that are still there now, such is the quality of the two lads that run it now, which is Charlie's two boys. And lovely lads. I mean, and they followed on the same as the three, Charlie, Len and Joe, the three brothers. So it's a really nice place to be and work. Yeah, it's been expanded over the years from what it was. A tiny garage, quite big. When I first started there, the two previous owners, the two Wheatley brothers, Uncle Bob and Danny Wheatley, they were still working there right into their 70s. I think Bob was in his early 80s before he finished. He used to do the lawnmower sharpening and things like that. What was it? Mr. Wheatley, Danny Wheatley, if ever you saw him pick up the welding torch, you made a hasty retreat because he used to frighten everybody to death with it. And then he never blew us up, but you don't know. But there you go. Happy memories. Oh dear.
Roy, why did you decide to go into the motor trade?
Well, why I decided to go into motor trade is because my father got me the job. I didn't want to be a mechanic, but I wanted to be a carpenter, but he got the job, so I had to take it.
Was he a friend of the Lillywhites?
Well, I think...
Or knew them?
I think he used to go and get his petrol there when he was...
a friend?
Years ago, you know.
Customer.
That's how he got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were the first apprentice?
I was the first apprentice, yeah.
That's right.
In 1950.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah. Can you remember your wages at that time?
Well, I was thinking somewhere about paying £1.50, something like that. Not very much, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Tell us about the training that you got there.
Well, the training was very good because being I was the only young lad there, we had Mr. Joe Lillywhite and Charlie Lillywhite and a chap called Ron Mumby. He was the fitter there. So they just give you a job and told you what to do, and you've done it. And when you've done it, you ask what else they wanted to do, and that's how you gradually.
You built up.
Yeah, you gradually built up, you know.
Right.
And that's.
And how long was the apprentice?
And I was an apprentice.
Yeah.
I was there for 5 years.
5 years apprentice.
Yeah, so I'd done my national service.
Did you do day release at all?
Yes, I did.
Where did you do it?
Anglesey Road in Portsmouth.
Ah, right.
Yeah, and evenings as well. We had one evening a week and 1 day a week. Yeah.
What were your hours as an apprentice?
Well, it was just an 8-hour day. It was about 48 hours a week, wasn't it, in those days?
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have any funny or memorable experiences?
Well,
The petrol pump.
I used to have to take the cars out in the morning and put the car pack in the back, and the petrol pump was always in the way, you know, on the left-hand side, and they was always renewing it, and I was always knocking it down. But they never took no notice of it, and they just got on, put another pump in, just got a little telling off, you know, that was all right. I did have one funny moment one day with a pre-select gearbox car, an Armstrong Civic it was, and...
Is this the forerunner of the automatic?
Yeah, it's an automatic, and of course I got in it and didn't realise how to start it, put the key in and wouldn't start, so I thought, oh, put the key on and go and wind the handle. But I wound the handle, started up, pushed me against the wall, and I had a shake, and Mr. Lee went to stop it.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Silly little things like that, you know.
And you left to do your national service?
Yeah, I left to do my national service.
They were good and took you back on?
Oh yeah, they took you back on. That was a part of the deal when you've done your apprenticeship.
Yeah,
They had to take you on for 6 months afterwards.
6 months?
Yeah, they took you on for 6 months, and then on like an approval.
Yeah.
You didn't give skilled money until you was done your 6 months approval.
Right.
And then I was there in 1961, I think. Yeah, 61. And then I moved on. You know, went over to Haskins and then Lumley there.
Right.
Worked on lorries. Typical working day really. It was like the first day I used to get there in the morning.
Yeah.
Used to sweep up.
Right.
Then put all the tools away, which was left on the bench. Then I'd go up and ask them what they wanted me to do. They said, well, you've got to mend a puncher, or you've got to go out Mr. Mumby, do an engine, things like that. You know.
Right. It was a good all-round experience.
Yeah, it's good all round, yeah.
Right.
They set you a task,
Yeah.
and they kept an eye on you, and that's what you've done. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
You think of any? So,
I don't know, were there any sort of other funny things that happened to you? Do you recall one?
Well, I had a dish of petrol catch light in my hand one day. Well, I emptied it out. Never knew where the spark come from. It just set alight, and things like little things like that, you know. But not many funny things really, because you had got on and done your job, you know.
Okay. Did you have any unusual customers at the garage that you recall? Or?
Oh, we had some funny customers, all right. One customer, I had to take his wheel off. I put his nut staying on the ground, and got told off by putting them on the ground. Another customer used to stand and tell me how to change a tyre. Gosh, and I got, said, well, why don't, if you know how to change, why don't you do it yourself? Of course, I got told off for that.
yeah, a customer is a customer.
And another thing, Mr. Lillywhite was used to have the other shop in the back of the garage. I used to have to go up there sometimes to work, but I'd sort of slump up there with my hands in my pockets, and I would get told off by him.
You got to look busy. Yeah.
He said, you're working for us now. He said, you take your hands out of your pockets and you walk up there smartly. Yes, Mr. Lillywhite. I never liked working at the other shop. I always liked working in the front garage. I don't know why. It's because I started there, I suppose. You know.
And Bernie was in the other shop.
Yeah, Bernie was in there. There was, I don't know how many was in there. I think about 5, 6 in that shop, I think. Yeah. There was Bernie, apprentice. Dave Lassie was an apprentice. Geoffrey Page, he was an apprentice. So there's 4 apprentices altogether. Went over there, come after me, like,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, one thing I like, because if you were tuning an engine, you'd have to listen to it, you know?
Yeah.
There was none of this put it on a computer, and the computer tells you what to do. You had to find out and mess about with it until you got it right, you
So
know?
you understood the...
Yeah, you understood, yeah. Yeah,
Right.
very good. Yeah, they were good at the teaching you. They had patience with you anyway. That's what I liked about it. You know.
Anne, would you like to tell me when you started work and how you got started?
I started work at Lillywhite's in, I think it was about the November, December of 1963. And I was there for 9 years until I left for the birth of my son. And I was the first female pump attendant in Lillywhite's ever. So I started a trend, because when I left, they all followed. So it's very good. No, it's very friendly place to work with the three brothers. I got on very well with most of them all the time. Charlie was a little bit strict, but Joe was. It was great fun. Great fun.
And how old were you when you started there?
16. just turned, which seems a lifetime ago. Yeah.
Was it your first job? Or?
No, I started work next door at a garage called Border Garage, which ran alongside Lillywhite's, which is now their MOT bay, for a chap called Peter Blake, and it was. I was there for a few months, and then he wanted to move to Gosport, so I was poached by Joe and asked if I'd like to go and work there. So that started an era of what, nine good years.
And what made you go into the motor trade then?
Well, it's like everything in those days. You left school if you didn't have any qualifications. It was just a case of starting work as soon as you could. I finished school on the Friday and started work on the Monday. So it was, it was just those days. And I started work. I think my starting pay was about £4.7 and 6, going up to about £5 if I remember, which to me seemed an awful lot of money in those days. And it was in the days that people used to tip you for filling their cars with petrol and doing their oil and tyres, and so I did very well. Loved it.
So there was quite a lot of work involved then, not just.
Oh yeah. I was also taught, because previous to me, the boys, they had a young lad doing petrol pumps, and then they trained them as mechanics. There's no way I was going to be a mechanic. So they used to that I was taught to change tyres, change plugs, and do the points on a car. That was Joe taught me to do that. They didn't let me loose on driving the cars because I never did learn to drive. Never did. They did actually give me a course of driving lessons, because they also had a driving school, which used to run from the garage, not by them, but Bob Reeves it was called, and so I had a course of driving lessons from them, but never did pass and never did drive. So I was never let loose on the cars at all. Good job. Yeah.
So did you have to wear a uniform? Because it must be
not really. I had a blue nylon 3/4 overall, and that was it. Not a uniform. They did try to give you because it was a national garage when I started there, and I did have a couple of national overalls there. Not overalls, coats with national on the back, but. No, it wasn't very successful. I was allowed to wear what I wanted, really, as long as you had some sort of covering. And you needed it too, because it was a dirty job, But it was good. It was good.
And how did you get on being the first woman doing that job then?
I had my leg pulled, obviously. There was about, if I can remember, I think there was about 7 mechanics, plus the brothers. And I was as green as grass, being a girl. And I did have my leg pulled, but it was great fun, really. I mean, I used to have to make tea and things like that for them. But I was left mostly, you didn't mix, you didn't go into the workshop. You weren't advised to go in the workshop, put it that way. A, because of the language, and you can't make mechanics not swear.
No.
So Joe did try once or twice to say moderate your language, but it never went very far. So I only went out there in the morning to do the tea machine and stayed out of there as much as possible. So my job was on the front.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had to, I didn't have to, I was taught a bit of bookkeeping by Mrs. Lillywhite, and filing, which stood me in good stead. And I used to decorate the showroom, as and when. It's supposed to be done, I think, every week or so, but depending how busy you were, it didn't get done. And if a new car went in there, then you had to make sure it was all polished off, and so yes, very varied, actually. Very varied.
Did the boys ever play any tricks on you?
No, not really. I think I think actually they were warned not to. So, no, other than a gentle teasing, no, not really, no. They were quite good.
I think you were telling us about the time when you used to go up to the storeroom or something.
Oh, up on the stairs, yeah, upstairs. They had a storeroom, which was in the showroom, and it was one of these mezzanine open mesh type of stairs. It used to frighten me to death. But yeah, I used to have to go and search for stuff, and I'd be up there ages, and they, you know, I'd slam the door downstairs, or you know, or say boo. But no, it wasn't too bad. Yeah, they weren't too bad. No.
Did you get to know many regular customers?
Yes, we did. We had several actually. Derek Nimmo was the one who used to come in. He used to live down Bath Road somewhere.
What
He
sort
used
of
to come
car
in.
did he have?
I don't know if you remember him, but he was a right.
Yes.
And we had Brigadier General Sir Brian Horrocks. Was another great. He was a favourite. He was an absolute gentleman, and I had a telegram from him on my wedding day, which was a great surprise, which I've still got to this day. And we had a few oddities, if you like. There was one gentleman from Dolphin House, always had an old car, and he would insist. It never went on the road, but he'd bring it across the garage to have his tyres, his water and everything checked. And we used to dread that, because it was a big old-fashioned Ford, it's big old-fashioned things, but yeah, so we had a few, and I had a lot of customers when I got married that I had one who was a Hot Point rep, Bob, so I had a washing machine cost price, had a photographer, did my, not a photographer, a printer, who did my invitations on me. So it was quite handy, very handy. and it's funny enough, I still see people that I served those years ago in the village. Around and about. And it's, yeah, it's quite funny, yeah. And my daughter then joined Lillywhite's about 10 years ago. She did the same job on the petrol pumps that I did. So, working for the boys. So she worked for the sons and I worked for the fathers. So, carrying on tradition. It's quite good.
So, why did you leave in the end? Then?
Oh, well, in the end, I got married in '69, and the boys came to that. They were very well behaved, I have to say. And then I left when I had my son in '72. And it was and funny enough, the first time I took him out for a walk, I had to go over the garage and show him off. And in those days, you put silver in a child's hand for luck. He came away quite wealthy. Yeah, it's good.